Perfect. Well, firstly, congratulations on your recent appointment. And in the Law Society's 196-year history, you've become the first BME president and the sixth female president. I was wondering, what does it mean to you to hold that title?
Well, thank you very much, James, for inviting me to speak with you. So I am the 177th, as you said, the sixth female, the first Black office holder and the first person of colour to become president of the Law Society of England and Wales. And in fact, the second person in almost 50 years to come from an in-house background as a solicitor. What does it mean to me? It's a remarkable opportunity to occupy this space, to meet so many different people, from aspiring solicitors to those like yourselves who have just completed their degrees, to those trainees, junior lawyers, to senior practitioners, to judges. An absolute privilege to be in this space. And what did it mean to me when I was called when I was called and given the news? I broke down in tears. And it still takes my breath away to this day to be doing a job that I absolutely love.
Nowadays, it's far less common for solicitors to pursue a Master's of Law after they've qualified. But I was wondering, what motivated you to pursue a Master's at King's?
Well, I think what motivated me was the fact that I believe that life is one constant lesson, that, you know, we have to be constantly learning and developing. When we stand still, in my mind, that's when I think, you know, things start to go wrong. That's perhaps when we have lost our passion. So what motivated me was that I wanted to develop. And I worked for an organisation, ACCA at the time, that provided me with that opportunity, that you could train, you could do a course. So I was sponsored by ACCA to do my Masters, and they paid for it. So I was grateful that I could work, I could learn. I had a boss who was flexible enough to allow me flexible time work-ins to attend the courses. But absolutely, I was told as a very young solicitor that you don't need any other qualification, that, you know, once you're qualified, the route is to partnership, and that's all you'll ever need. I think it's fair to say that that perhaps was correct at the time. But, you know, the legal landscape is changing. And I think we realise as practitioners that we have to be evolving, and we have to be constantly developing and learning.
It's obviously evident that your career is just so diverse and expansive, actually. But most, like, if not all careers, obviously have their peaks and troughs. Can you tell us about your career standout moments and also what you focused on during the times when things maybe aren't going so well?
Let's talk about the things when they weren't going so terribly well. You know, at the end of the day, I see every delay, every detour as an opportunity to do things differently, refine. So, for instance, you know, after 4 attempts, I was successfully elected as Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales. And what those 3 opportunities before allowed me to do was to rethink, refine my offering, and to do things differently, do things better. I don't like to focus on the negatives, because I think when we focus on the negatives, it can be, you know, part of our DNA, and, you know, it becomes part of our mantra. So I like to focus on the positives. So absolutely, those detours, delays, perhaps some of us will call it, when, you know, all suggest that when things weren't going so well. But for me, it was an opportunity to learn, to do things differently. So the highlight of my career has to be being president of this organisation. As I say, so once you're elected as Deputy Vice President, it's an automatic 3-year trajectory, and to become Vice President and then to become President. But, you know, a remarkable opportunity, as I say, to occupy this space and to be doing this role. In fact, I said job earlier. I think it's an understatement to suggest it's a job. It is a role that I hold, and I'm proud to be in.
Wow, and it's just mind-boggling. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I love how you twist it back into a learning opportunity at the end of the day, you know, as you say. Um, well, so just as our next question, actually, being the head of the professional body, um, you obviously know the legal profession is a challenging but a highly rewarding career choice. What advice would you offer those considering pursuing a career in law, just like myself, actually?
Well, absolutely. There is what I would say is that, when I was getting into the law, and in fact, we were speaking about this yesterday, that, at the time, nobody spoke about alternative routes into law. So for me, it was private practice. Going back to what we were speaking about earlier about undertaking a master's, it was you did your training contract, you qualified, and then the aspiration was to be in private practice to become a senior partner. Well, I knew very early on that I didn't want to become a senior partner. I had been made redundant twice in as many years in private practice. So I decided to try something different. So, I'm often asked about different career routes into law. And I think it's important that we do our research, we explore. We are definite about our purpose and which areas of law that we want to go into. So, for instance, for all of us who've been watching, some of those drama series on TV, they're called drama for a reason. That may not necessarily be the reality of practice. So, for instance, if you're going to go into crime, it is perhaps that you may work long hours. Well, you're probably going to work long hours as a solicitor anyway, but potentially you could be working long hours for little pay or little reward, I should say. Whereas other areas of practice can be, like, for instance, going in-house. We know that in-house is the fastest growing area of our sector, of our membership of the Law Society. Some 25% of our members are working in-house. And particularly if you are female and come from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background, you are more likely to go in-house. But the whole point is do your research. Think about what it is that you want to go into. And my absolute advice is to never give up, and that every door is open if you push, if you persevere until something happens. And one more bit of advice, if I may, is that, you have to sing your own song. So essentially what your mate has done, or perhaps what your parents have done, may not necessarily suit you. You've got to make your own mistakes, find out for yourself, and then decide what it is that you want to do. But research, absolutely important to research, absolutely important to network. Don't be afraid to ask, because as my mother says, if you don't ask, you don't get. So make sure you're bold in your asking, and also in your belief. Self-belief and confidence has got me many places.
Wow, and evidently it has, actually. But you said you talk about how there's just often people see a very set route, and for you, you've had a fascinating career journey, and many King students I know are keen to pursue the traditional training contract route. But I was wondering what inspired you to pursue the in-house route instead?
I think it was, James, as I said, I think it was that I had been made redundant twice in as many years. There were, following cuts to public funding. I was in a traditional high street practice, if you like. But also, there was part of me that started to realise, when I was looking at some of the advertisements, talking to some of the recruiters, the salary that was on offer, the benefits that were on offer, and the recognition actually that I could go in-house, and that, you'd be constantly know perhaps one day might be the same. And I had lots of friends as well who I'd gone to law school with, who'd gone into private practice, but some who actually hadn't gone into private practice but did the LPC and decided that actually the skills they gained from the LPC would set them in good stead doing other things. Whereas other friends went into private practice, and within a year or so that they had left because they said about the billable targets, the long working hours, and so forth. That is the reality of the industry, in as much that, private practice, there will be billable hours, there will be targets, but there are different business models that we are now seeing. Whereas in-house for me, the driver was that I had come to a point where, as I say, a recognition that private practice wasn't for me. I wanted greater flexibility. I wanted to work Monday to Friday with the ability to work maybe one day at home, you know, my weekends free. And so for me, it was greater flexibility and the opportunity to be working, you know, with some of the biggest in-house departments around. Although that didn't always play out, because sometimes I was the only legal counsel in a department. But such is the variety of in-house and indeed private practice.
Oh, and I completely respect that, actually, finding your own purpose and really persisting on it. I think, yeah, a lot of students would be helped just listening to that advice. So reflecting on your different experiences in work, how did they help you to achieve your goals and get to where you are now?
Well, I think it increased or it cemented my resilience, you know, in as much that, you know, I met working in-house allowed me the opportunity to work with some amazing people. And in fact, one of the other things I did earlier on in my career, I was given a piece of advice by a fellow solicitor. And that piece of advice was to not, was to network, you know, and I wasn't quite sure what they meant at the time. But I'm in no doubt that through those networks that I have got to where I am today. So the advice to network, and when you do network, you know, and you go into a room, and I know it's difficult at the moment because we are virtual, but there will come a time where we will be back in the room together. So take the opportunity. You know, if you see somebody who perhaps is the senior partner of a firm or a partner in a firm or you know, the CEO, general counsel, whatever, of an organization, take the opportunity to go up, have your business card ready, of course, when, you know, it's safe to have those ready, but, you know, and introduce yourself. Social media, you can do that already, you know, by following somebody or connecting with somebody. But the point is, be bold enough in your asking and in your wanting. So networking is important. And that's, as I say, one of the disadvantages of us working virtually at the moment is that we don't have that those opportunities so much so.
Absolutely, I think, yeah, completely different on the virtual scheme, especially even with conducting this interview as well. You said that you're determined to leave the legal profession more diverse and inclusive than the one you entered, but you're also very open about the barriers to access that you faced in your career journey. My question is, what would you say to students who are concerned about the historical or traditional barriers into the legal profession?
Well, I mean, absolutely. The thing is, if you sit and think about it, like, for instance, it's raining outside very heavy, and my mother will determine that based on how heavy it's raining, you know, that she's not going to go out today. Whereas some of us will decide, well, actually, it's raining, I'm going out anyway. You know, it's at the end of the day, it's how much do you want something? And if you have a dream, as I did, and that dream keeps you awake at night, you know, that all you can think about, you know, is that dream, the aspiration to be a solicitor. You've got to turn that aspiration into being a solicitor. So, you know, I'm very much into positive thinking, very much into mindfulness. And I heard somebody say, and I absolutely believe this, if you want to know where you'll be in 5 years' time, listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth now. So if you want to be a solicitor, you say, I'm going to be a solicitor. You know, if you want to work in a particular firm, a big corporation, you've got to say it. But not only say it, you've got to say it with purpose and emphasis and belief. And the thing is, what I would say to fellow colleagues is that, you know, you never give up. You never never think that you can't, because all the people who told me in my life that I couldn't, I was determined that I could. So you absolutely have to keep going. And there will be obstacles. I'm not suggesting that there's not going to be barriers. You know, when you look at the figures, as I say, you know, people from a Black, Asian, minority, ethnic background still face barriers in the legal profession. And that's regardless of whether that's the solicitor profession, you know, the bar, the judiciary, wherever. But at the end of the day, we know there is greater diversity at entry level. The obstacles, and not just for Black, Asian, minority, ethnic solicitors or potential applicants, but for females as well, is, you know, mid-career, around progression and retention. And we are doing our utmost to address those issues. and highlight those issues to organisations and to firms, and what we can all do better and differently to make a difference. The fact that I'm in this space is a signal to change. Over the last year or so, and especially with, the death of George Floyd and so forth, shone a spotlight on the structural inequalities that exist in our society, and the legal profession is not exempted from that. As I say, certain members continue to face barriers, and it's important that we all work together to start to dismantle those barriers, because the aptitude, ability, must be the only determinant to you being a successful solicitor. Nothing else. No other characteristic. And where individuals want to come into this profession, they should be supported, enabled, and empowered to thrive in this profession. And it's important that we all play a part. For those of us from a diverse, non-traditional background, but that we stand up and we're counted. And for those colleagues who are, the decision makers, that actually we recognise that diversity brings so much to an organisation, to the table. And I also say it's not just good enough to give somebody a seat at the table. You must allow the individual's voice to be heard, to allow them to speak.
Absolutely. I think, definitely there's been change, but as you say, we can wholeheartedly go, push it forward more. Just as a penultimate question, most people focus on developing legal skills, but as you say, networking and other skills like this are very important. In your opinion, what soft or transferable skills are necessary to build a successful career in the legal sector?
Well, absolutely. One of the greatest skills, transferable skills, is the ability to listen, but not only listen, but to be able to listen and actually understand what you have heard. Because some of us are good at listening, but then if you say, well, what did I just say? Some people are not good in transcribing that back. But the ability to listen, to communicate. Communication is such a big part of who we are as solicitors, aspiring legal professionals, and so forth. The ability to communicate, the ability to interact with others, to converse with others, and the ability to hold your own, whether that's in a meeting space, in a classroom, or if you're out in a courtroom. But it's the ability to, as I say, to stand up and have your voice heard, and encourage others to equally to do the same.
Obviously, thank you so much for talking with me and conducting this interview. It has been an absolutely inspiring pleasure. Any other final comments for our students, if you'd like to say?
Well, absolutely. There is a lady, Verna Myers, who says that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. I take that slightly further. And when I spoke about, putting diversity or bringing diversity to the table, and that not just being enough, what I would say is that there is a seat at that table waiting for you to take your seat.
That's a lovely quote to finish it off. Thank you so much, Stephanie, actually, for talking with me, and I'm sure many students alike will take your words and use it, and it will help them immensely. But thank you so much.